It was a rainy afternoon, and Peppa and George were bored. Daddy Pig, with a twinkle in his eye, brought out an old, dusty projector he'd found in the attic. "Who wants to watch a movie?" he boomed, but his voice seemed to echo strangely in the quiet room. Peppa and George, usually excited by anything new, approached the projector with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The air around it felt cold, and a faint metallic scent, like old blood, wafted from its dusty casing. "What kind of movie, Daddy?" Peppa asked, her voice a little shaky. Daddy Pig just chuckled, oblivious. As he fiddled with the settings, a strange, almost imperceptible symbol seemed to glow faintly within the projector lens, pulsing with a dim, sickly yellow light. It was a symbol neither Peppa nor George had ever seen. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig, still smiling, unfurled a makeshift screen on the wall. They were completely absorbed in their task, humming a cheerful tune, while the faint, metallic smell grew stronger, and the projector hummed with an unnatural, low thrum. Peppa and George sat on the sofa, their eyes fixed on the projector. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, twisting into unsettling shapes behind them. The air grew heavy, and the cheerful hum of the projector began to sound more like a mournful wail. The projector flickered to life, casting a distorted image onto the screen. It was an empty theater stage, but something was wrong. The curtains were tattered, the seats ripped, and a pervasive sense of desolation hung in the air. A single, broken spotlight cast a harsh, unnatural glow. Then, a shadowy figure, barely discernible, appeared on the stage. It was tall and gaunt, its limbs unnaturally long, and its head tilted at an impossible angle. It seemed to be watching them even through the grainy projection. Peppa and George clutched each other, their eyes wide with fear. The figure on the screen seemed to move, a slow, deliberate step forward, and the metallic smell intensified, making them gag. Daddy Pig, however, merely adjusted his glasses, thinking it was a trick of the light. The shadowy figure on the screen raised a hand, its fingers long and skeletal, reaching out towards them. A faint, scratching sound emanated from the projector, as if something was trying to claw its way out. The living room lights flickered erratically, plunging the room into momentary darkness before returning, each time a little dimmer. The temperature dropped sharply, and their breath plumed in the cold air. The figure on screen steps closer, its eyes glowing red. The scratching from the projector grew louder, more frantic, and the metallic smell was now overwhelming. Close-up of Peppa's face, a single tear of terror. Peppa's face was a mask of pure terror, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her throat. George was whimpering, burying his face in her side. The figure on screen reaches out, its hand extending beyond the screen's edge. It was no longer just a movie, the projector shaking violently, sparks flying. The hum turned into a high-pitched whine, and the glowing symbol in the lens pulsed with blinding intensity. The shadowy hand materializes in the room, solidifying into a grotesque, clawed appendage. It moved with terrifying speed, reaching directly for Peppa, its long fingers poised to grasp her. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig finally notice, their smiles fading to horror. Their smiles vanished, replaced by expressions of pure, unadulterated horror as they witnessed the spectral hand. Daddy Pig lunges for the projector, trying to turn it off. The shadowy hand recoiled slightly, as if in pain, but did not disappear. The hand grabs Peppa. It was a beautiful, sunny afternoon, perfect for a family picnic. Peppa, George, Mummy Pig, and Daddy Pig had found the perfect spot, surrounded by green trees and colorful flowers. Peppa was especially happy, enjoying her crisp, red apple. But as the afternoon wore on, a peculiar feeling began to settle over the park. The shadows seemed to stretch a little longer, and the air grew strangely still. Peppa noticed a tiny, dark spot on her apple, but thought nothing of it. George, happily playing with his beloved dinosaur, was oblivious to the subtle changes. His dinosaur's eyes, usually a cheerful blue, flickered with a faint red glow for a fleeting moment, then returned to normal. Mummy Pig, ever the diligent one, poured tea for everyone. But as the dark liquid flowed from the teapot, it seemed to deepen to an inky black, only to lighten again, leaving Mummy Pig to wonder if her eyes were playing tricks on her. Daddy Pig, engrossed in his newspaper, suddenly saw the headlines twist into strange, unsettling symbols. He rubbed his eyes, convinced it was just a trick of the light, and continued reading. Peppa, still enjoying her apple, didn't notice the dark spot growing larger, pulsing with a faint, almost imperceptible rhythm. She took another bite, completely unaware of the peculiar change. Suddenly, the sky above their picnic spot darkened, as if a storm cloud had appeared from nowhere, yet the rest of the park remained bathed in sunlight. A low, guttural growl echoed, seemingly from nowhere. The picnic blanket began to ripple and shift, as if something unseen was moving beneath it. The family exchanged nervous glances, a sense of unease settling over them. George's dinosaur toy tumbled to the ground, its eyes now glowing a vivid, unwavering red. George cried out, pointing at the toy, his small face filled with fear. Mummy Pig's teapot began to steam and hiss, the tea inside bubbling ominously. With a gasp, she dropped it, and the dark liquid spread across the blanket like an inky stain. Daddy Pig's newspaper suddenly burst into a brief puff of dark smoke, leaving only a pile of ashes. He stared in disbelief, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Peppa's apple was now completely black, and a small, glowing red eye opened on its surface, staring directly at her. Peppa screamed, a sound of pure terror. The trees surrounding them began to twist and contort, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The low growl intensified, echoing through the darkening air. The ground beneath their feet cracked, and faint, glowing red lines appeared, spreading outwards from their picnic spot like a sinister web. The family huddled together, their faces pale with terror, their eyes wide and darting frantically, searching for an escape from the growing horror. At the edge of the encroaching darkness, a shadowy figure emerged, vaguely pig-like, yet horribly distorted. It stood with glowing red eyes, watching them. The shadowy figure took a step closer, and the air grew instantly cold. A faint, chilling whisper, unintelligible yet undeniably menacing, filled the silence. Peppa's family tried to run, but their feet felt as if they were glued to the ground. They struggled, pulling with all their might, but remained rooted in place. The shadowy figure raised a hand, and the glowing red lines on the ground intensified, rising up to form a shimmering, inescapable cage around the terrified family. The figure's face became slightly clearer, revealing a sinister, wide grin with far too many teeth. It was still in the familiar Peppa Pig style, yet profoundly unsettling. It was a quiet afternoon at the Pig family home. Peppa and George were playing with their toys in the living room, the sunlight streaming through the windows creating a warm, comfortable atmosphere. "George, look, what's this pretty box?" Peppa had been reaching for her favorite book when she spotted something unusual. An old, ornate music box sat on a high shelf, covered in delicate carvings and tiny painted flowers. She was certain she'd never seen it before. The music box felt surprisingly heavy in Peppa's small hands. Its surface was smooth and cool, with intricate patterns that seemed to shift slightly when she wasn't looking directly at them. A small golden key protruded from its side. "Let's see what it does." Peppa turned the tiny golden key. Immediately, a hauntingly beautiful melody began to play, unlike any tune she'd heard before. The notes seemed to float through the air, creating an almost magical atmosphere in the room. George stopped playing with his dinosaur and listened intently. The melody was beautiful, but there was something about it that made him feel different. Not scared, exactly, but as if the music was trying to tell them something important. "Oh my, there's a little dancer inside." As the melody continued, a tiny figure emerged from within the music box. It was a delicate ballerina, no bigger than Peppa's thumb, spinning gracefully on one foot. Her dress seemed to shimmer with each turn. As Peppa and George watched in wonder, something extraordinary happened. The tiny ballerina seemed to turn her head and look directly at them, her painted eyes meeting theirs. For a moment, it felt as if she was truly alive. "Oh my goodness! Where did you find that?" Mummy Pig had entered the room to check on the children, but stopped short when she saw the music box. Her expression was one of surprise and something else. Recognition, perhaps? "That music box belonged to my grandmother. I haven't seen it in years. I thought it was lost forever." Mummy Pig's voice carried a note of wonder and nostalgia. "Grandmother used to say it had special properties, but I never quite understood what she meant." As if responding to Mummy Pig's words, the melody suddenly shifted. The simple tune became more complex, with harmonies that seemed impossible for such a small music box. The notes intertwined like whispered secrets from long ago. "Look, she's dancing differently now." The tiny ballerina's movements had become more elaborate, more expressive. She seemed to be telling a story through her dance, her arms gracefully gesturing as if she were trying to communicate something important. "What's all this beautiful music?" Daddy Pig had been drawn from his newspaper by the captivating melody. As he approached, the music seemed to grow even more enchanting, filling the entire room with its mysterious charm. The entire pig family found themselves gathered around the small music box, each mesmerized by the tiny ballerina's graceful performance. The melody seemed to weave a spell around them, creating a moment of perfect, mysterious harmony. Dinosaur danced too. George, in his simple way, seemed to understand what the ballerina was trying to communicate. She appeared to be beckoning to them, her tiny arms extended in invitation, as if asking them to join her in the magical dance. Without quite realizing it, the pig family began to sway gently to the music. The melody had a hypnotic quality that made it impossible to resist. They moved together in perfect harmony, as if the music box was conducting their movements. Everything looked so pretty. As they continued to move to the music, the room around them seemed to shimmer and change subtly. The colors appeared more vivid, the light more golden, as if the music box was transforming their ordinary living room into something magical. The tiny ballerina's dance reached a crescendo, her movements becoming so graceful and fluid that she seemed. Once upon a time, in a quiet little town, Peppa Pig and her family discovered something very strange in their garden. "George, come and see this. There's a new muddy puddle in our garden, but it wasn't raining yesterday." Dinosaur points excitedly. The muddy puddle was unlike any they had seen before. It was perfectly round and seemed to shimmer with an odd, dark reflection. "That's very strange, George. Look at my reflection. It doesn't look quite right."
Grrrr.
Makes worried dinosaur sounds. "What are you two looking at?" "Oh my, where did this enormous puddle come from? I'm an expert at muddy puddles, and I've never seen one quite like this before. Seems to go very, very deep." Suddenly, the puddle began to make soft bubbling sounds, as if something was moving deep beneath the surface. "Let me try throwing a pebble in it. Maybe we can hear how deep it is." "Where's stone go? That's very peculiar indeed. I heard there was something unusual happening in your garden." "Oh my word, that's quite an extraordinary puddle." Grandpa Pig was very wise and had seen many strange things in his long life, but even he was puzzled by this mysterious puddle. "Look everyone, the reflection isn't showing our sky. It's showing something completely different. It looks like a beautiful underground cave with sparkling crystals." "Pretty. Dinosaur cave. Peppa, what an amazing discovery. It's like a window to another world. I've never seen anything like this before. It's like magic." The children decided to work together to solve the mystery of the magical muddy puddle. "Look, it's glowing, but it feels warm and friendly, not frightening." To everyone's delight, the puddle was home to tiny, magical creatures who had been living peacefully underground. Flying friends, nice dinosaurs. They're so cute and friendly. Makes musical tinkling sounds. We've been waiting so long for kind friends to find our portal. The little fairy creatures had accidentally created the puddle portal while trying to return home to their crystal caves. Let's all sing together. Maybe our friendship and happiness can help them get home. Singing, "We are friends. We help each other through the sunshine and the rain. Thank you, kind friends, You will always be welcome in our crystal kingdom. The magical portal closed gently, leaving behind only happy memories and a perfectly ordinary muddy puddle. Well, that was quite an adventure, and now we have the best muddy puddle for jumping. I love happy endings, and I love muddy puddles. And so, Peppa and her friends learned that sometimes the most mysterious things can lead to the most wonderful friendships. The end. It was a foggy evening in Peppa's neighborhood. The playground looked different today, darker, quieter than usual. Peppa and her friends decided to play one last game before going home. "Let's play hide and seek," squealed Peppa excitedly. But as she looked around, she noticed something strange. The swings were moving by themselves, creaking in the wind. Susie Sheep was the first to hide. She ran behind the big oak tree, but when she looked back, the playground seemed to stretch endlessly into the mist. Pedro Pony galloped toward the slide, but it appeared much taller than before. The steps seemed to go up and up, disappearing into the gray clouds above. Rebecca Rabbit hopped to her hiding spot near the seesaw, but the seesaw was moving up and down on its own, making eerie squeaking sounds that echoed through the empty playground. Peppa began counting 1, 2, 3, but her voice sounded different, deeper and more echoing than usual. The numbers seemed to float in the air around her. When Peppa reached 10, she opened her eyes. The playground had transformed completely. Everything was covered in thick, swirling fog, and strange shadows danced between the equipment. "Ready or not, here I come," called Peppa. But her friends were nowhere to be seen. Only their faint giggles could be heard, coming from different directions. Peppa walked toward the swings, but they stopped moving the moment she approached. The chains hung perfectly still, as if frozen in time. She heard Susie's voice calling from behind the tree, "Peppa, come find me." But when Peppa looked, she saw multiple shadows of Susie dancing around the trunk. The slide had grown even taller, reaching into the dark sky. Pedro's voice echoed from the top, "Help me, Peppa, I can't get down." But the slide seemed to have no end. Rebecca's laughter came from the seesaw, but it sounded like many rabbits laughing at once. The seesaw moved faster and faster, creating a rhythmic thumping sound. Peppa felt confused and a little scared. "This isn't how hide and seek usually works," she thought. The playground equipment seemed to be playing tricks on her. Suddenly, all the sounds stopped. The playground became completely silent. Even the wind had stopped blowing, and the fog hung motionless in the air. "Friends," called Peppa nervously. "Where are you?" Her voice was the only sound in the eerie silence. Even her own footsteps seemed muffled. Then, from all around her, came the sound of giggling. But it wasn't quite right. The giggles were too long, too echoing, and seemed to come from everywhere at once. The playground equipment began to move again, but in impossible ways. The roundabout spun backward, the swing swayed in perfect unison, and the slide grew and shrank. Peppa realized this wasn't a normal game anymore. "I want to go home," she called out. But the playground seemed to stretch in all directions, with no clear way out. Just then, she heard a familiar voice. "Peppa, wake up." It was Mummy Pig's voice, but it sounded far away, as if coming from another world. The fog began to swirl faster and faster around Peppa. The playground equipment spun and moved in a dizzying dance, creating a whirlwind of colors and sounds. "Wake up, Peppa." The voice grew louder and clearer. The strange playground began to fade, becoming transparent like a ghost. Peppa blinked her eyes and found herself in her own bed, with Mummy Pig gently shaking her shoulder. "You were having a nightmare, little one," said Mummy Pig softly. "Oh," gasped Peppa, looking around her familiar bedroom. It was all a dream. The playground, the fog, my friends. It was all just a scary dream. Mummy Pig tucked Peppa back into bed. "Sometimes our imagination can play tricks on us," she explained. "But you're safe now, and tomorrow you can play with your real friends." Peppa smiled and closed her eyes. But just before she fell back asleep, she could have sworn she heard the faint sound of playground swings creaking in the distance.